Hi, and welcome to Hypothetically Intentional, where we ask the question, what if we set intentions with everything we do? I'm your host, Michelle Albers, and today I have special guest Kat Kronemeyer. Hi, Kat.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Before we get to it, do you prefer? Hey, I was just sitting there thinking, like, we're so cash, super great friends and all. Should I be introducing you as Dr. Kat Kronemeyer?
I mean, you can, but you don't have to. My title doesn't make me who I am. It's
Ah,
just
that's
like,
fair. But I
yeah.
do like when we're diving into like deep stuff that we have on our radar for today to acknowledge and appreciate Dr. Kat Kronemeyer.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
So my intention, let's set an intention right out of the
Intention is
gate.
great.
My intention for today, because we want to talk about shadow work because of
Mhm.
an experience, is to show up embraced and exuding compassion, embraced in and exuding out compassion. I just feel like we're wrapped in compassion today, and there's this like Kuan Yin compassionate bubble around us, and anyone who's listening who could just use an extra dose of it.
I'm nodding vehemently.
Yeah. That feels that feels like that came from Kuan Yin herself.
Yes, so helpful.
Okay, so here's how the concept for today started is I was, doing things I was doing one morning and I get a phone call from Kat and she says, "Could you just define your like how you define shadow work for me? I just need to hear it." And so I dove in and gave you my definition in that moment, and it led to a story that you said you would be willing to share on the podcast, which I'm very grateful for because I believe this is the kind of stuff we don't talk about enough. And I think it's helpful for people when we are able and willing to get vulnerable and talk about it. So the mic's all yours if you're willing, Kat.
Well, I am because I signed up for this, right?
You did.
Um,
I'm giving you an out again, just
no,
in case
I'm good.
you're
I'm
shifting
good.
into a different answer.
No. Okay, so backstory. At least once or twice a year, I take time for myself to do a hermitage. So I go by myself somewhere. Usually it's like a tiny house or like a tiny place, and I rent it for like, I don't know, 3 to 5 days or a week. And I just spend time with me and I do all the things that I want to do. And so I had booked time after our spiritual retreat at JID, like 2 weeks later. And so I went over to Wisconsin Dells in this lovely little condo. And as I was getting ready, I got this like persistent nudge, like open your box of journals that you've had since like adolescence and take them with you, take a whole bunch with you. And I was like, all right, well, I wasn't planning to do that, but okay. So, literally the night before, I think I asked my husband to bring in this huge tub of papers and like paperwork and journals. And so I took the ones that I knew were the oldest and I tried to kind of guess about like the middle range ones. So I think they were starting when I was like 14 or 15. I chucked them in a bag. They were up through college and maybe a little bit after college. I think I was missing one in my set. And I brought them with me on my trip. So each night I would go through and read what I had written and like so fucking cringeworthy, right? Like, sorry for the swears.
No,
I
it's
just
all right.
I can't help it.
That's what we
I can't
do.
help it, but I don't care. So I'm like 14, 15, like teenage angst, like I hate my parents, blah, blah, blah. But also recognizing like the context of my childhood, the context of my life, and thinking about who I was and how I was like programmed and conditioned, right? So programming is the things that happen external to us that change who we are in a not super great way. So they change us and sort of prohibit our development or our learning or our growth. And conditioning are the things that happen like within our family of origin that are woven into our narrative related to thriving and growing and developing and becoming the human that we are, right? So programming has a much more like negative connotation in my head, and conditioning has like a more neutral or potentially supportive connotation. Not always, but you know. Um, so I'm reading through this stuff and I recognize in my like early adulthood there was a patch of life where I was not, I mean, I wasn't a good human as an adolescent much of the time, but I made some very, very poor life choices as a, a young adult. going into college, right? Like I'm living in a dorm full of all women. Oh my God. I don't get along with many women at that age. Guys are just way easier. And that was a nightmare. My roommate situation was a nightmare. Like I had so much romance, drama, blah, 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 poor decisions and realizing like, oh my God, I was such a hurtful person. Like I was like emotionally abusive to people. Like I was stuck in this pattern and I was like hurting myself. I was hurting them and it felt awful to read it. And it was like so painful to read. And I read some of it. I like couldn't bring myself to read all of it, but also it was really helpful to read the journals prior, right? Like from my adolescence, recognizing how I grew up and what happened, and recognizing, well, of course, you want to, like in my case, juggle multiple men, right? Because I didn't have like unconditional love from male figures in my life. And so recognizing like the choices that I made, in my early adulthood were directly connected to how I was like you know, how I grew up and like the messages I got about myself while growing up. Um, and thinking about like, holy crap, like it makes perfect sense. And like I was able to have a level of compassion for myself that I've never been able to have. I think I've always felt so ashamed and so judgy about my
Mhm.
own choices. And like just like disgusted and repulsed by like the person that I was and the decisions that I made. That like I didn't want to face it at all. And I didn't want to talk about it and I didn't want to like actually look at it. But for whatever reason, Spirit was like, girl, you're doing this. And I was like,
It's
okay,
time.
like ready or not. I was like, okay, I guess. But I did it in a way where like and I journaled every night. So after I read whatever journal, whatever chunk of time I was reading, I would journal every night. I don't even know what I wrote, to be honest with you. I cannot recall like any of it at this point. But I have a different sense of ease and like I see myself like through a lens of compassion that I never have before. And that was like really profound. I don't remember what day I called you. I think I called you on like day 3 or 4. And I was like, Michelle, talk to me about what like shadow work is and help me understand like what I just did because it was profound. Um, I'll tell one other piece of the story. So the person that I was at like 18 and 19, I was not a fan of. Um, and I recognized that like she was really struggling. So I did parts work where like I asked her like you're not happy living on college campus, like staying in this memory, living in college. Like it was a really, really hard time your freshman and sophomore year. Where do you want to live? And in my head, I'm thinking, do you want to live with your friends on campus at this other dorm? And she was like, no. And I was like, well, do you want to like live, over here on campus? And she was like, no. And I was like, okay, well, where do you want to live? She's like, I want to live on the way east side of Duluth by a river in a tiny house. And I was like, okay. So I moved her to a tiny house, by this river in Duluth where like she's so much more comfortable and she's so much more calm and she's really safe and she's okay. So like even my memories of that time when I look back feel different now. Like my physiology has changed when I think back. Like I'm not like tense and tight and angsty. I'm like much more soft, which I feel like is really, really important in terms of the healing.
That's
What
amazing.
were what were you thinking, Michelle, like when I called you and told you my story?
There's so many layers to it that are so beautiful for me, just
Hmm.
because of like witnessing someone in the moment of doing the work and being blessed to receive the phone call, you know, and I don't mean that to make it about me. I mean that to like, there's something about witnessing somebody else going through something that you've experienced in your own way, in your own story, in your own programming, in your own conditioning that reminds you that it's available and it's worth it. Because I think sometimes when you're in the journey and it's so messy, and it's not always the right time. I'm not claiming that it's when I say it's available, I don't mean like do it, it's available. You must. I don't mean that. I mean like when it's right timing, you get the nudges of spirit saying, bring your journals. You need these journals. I don't know why I need these journals, but you said yes. You didn't say no, which is like, it's divinely timed. You're ready. You are ready. It may not be pretty. It may not be fun, but the profound results that come from it are amazing. So I don't know. I guess I was feeling tender. I was feeling like in my own way, feeling what you were feeling. Now, I mean, maybe I was empathically also feeling it. I don't know. But we're close enough in that way where sometimes that just happens without me even realizing it. Um, and so it was like this beautiful, you know, I was not prepared for the question, tell me more about shadow work. So it came gutturally, right? It came from my just instinctual, innate, like belief system of the work that I've done. And so when it dribbled out of my mouth, I was like, oh, thank you, Spirit, for helping me guide me to those words. Cause I don't, I don't know. Sometimes deep things like shadow work and inner child, when it's like, wait, hang on, I have to get my words around this because it's sometimes more a vibration than it is to put it into words is challenging
Hmm.
sometimes. It's also my job, so I better be able to do it. You know what I mean? But it just in that moment, I remember thinking, oh my God, I was so excited for you. Like she's
Hmm.
doing it, she's doing it. And because there were tears, I hope it's okay that I'm sharing that.
Oh,
But
100%.
because there were tears, it was like, and she's not fighting it.
Hmm.
She's like, she's diving into it. She's floating, sinking into it, whatever your words are. But like you were actively in it.
Yeah.
So like as a as a coach catalyst for healing, the layers of the successes that were joyful to celebrate with you for me were
Hmm.
a lot probably more than you felt in that moment, right? Because you were in the mess of it. But for me, I was like, Spirit knocked, she answered the door and she invited them in. And then she, started having some awareness and ahas and realizations about the work, and then was like, I think I need support and reached out for help. Another celebration. That's amazing because not everybody does that. And it's really
Hmm.
hard to do. And then it was like the unpacking of all the things that were coming in, and you were realizing and I don't think I really had to say a whole lot or did say a whole lot. I think it was like sometimes that verbal expression of what's happening when you're doing this work is enough just to when you hear yourself say it, like for me anyway, and maybe it's because I process externally a lot, but to hear myself say it gives me new awareness, new aha, and actually helps me release that version of the story to
Hmm.
create the space to invite in the accuracy of the truth of the now.
Hmm.
And so I was witnessing all that happening in real time with you as you were exploring this shadow work that you were like, I think I'm doing it. You're like, okay, I'm doing it. Like everything you just said confirms that I'm doing it. Holy shit, this is intense. I'm like, yes, what else do you need? And it's like, so there were so many beautiful layers to it. And then to be able to have that conversation and how are you feeling? What are you noticing? Do you need more support? Are you super beating up on that age? And then you were like, no, no, I took her to Duluth. And I was like, oh, you just held space for yourself. Okay. You're good. You're holding the space for your own healing because you now has the resources and the capacity to do that, which is
Hmm.
why the timing is so important. When I say it's available to you, I don't mean it's like right now. It's like there might be a lot of things that have to happen first or that, get to happen first. So it was just such a beautiful day. I just remember being so like, it sounds so like sick and twisted almost, but like so joyful for you. Like, oh, she's in pain. This is great. But it's not like that. It's like you're coming out of the sparkly goo that we talk about, the cocoon, right?
Hmm.
Like of the caterpillar. And it's like, oh, there's that butterfly. Like I've seen the butterfly the whole time. I always see the butterfly. But I understand the process of going from the caterpillar to the cocoon to the butterfly. And we do it over and over and over again in our life. And I just thought, ah, you go, girl. Well, and also because that hermitage that you were planning was so rocky to start with too. Like, because you had talked
Hmm.
about that before. And then just everything that you were saying, I was like, girl is tapped into her spirit, to her guides, to her highest self. And she is listening from that, what I'm these days calling that wise old crone.
Hmm.
Like she has it for you and you are connected to her. And that is a much wiser place to be connected from than that 14-year-old girl who you were
Oh
hating
my
on,
gosh. Holy, yeah. Oof.
So good.
And it's so funny because like as you're saying this, I'm recalling the actual walk, right? So I'm walking fast in Wisconsin Dells, actually Lake Delton, out of this condo because like I need to process it physically, right? Like I've been sitting,
Mhm.
I've been writing, I've been reading, and it was like gorgeous out. So I have to like move my body. So I put my shoes on, I call Michelle, and I'm walking, bawling, mind you. In this place I've never been. I have no idea where I am. I don't know where I'm going, sobbing, walking down the sidewalk on a fairly busy street, mind you. And then I'm passing construction trucks, right? There are dudes on the street walking behind construction trucks, spraying asphalt and like moving road cones, staring at me as I'm weeping and like rambling and walking really fast, talking to Michelle. So Michelle says it was gorgeous and beautiful and amazing. And like, yes, and actually, the reality of the situation was kind of absurd. So I'm just gonna throw that out there for
Such a great like visual of vibrationally, it's beautiful.
yes.
In the human world, it's atrocious.
Like, it's so funny when I think back. I'm like, oh God, that was memorable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love that you had the wherewithal to know that like I need to process this physically, like enough of this whole, spiritual downloads and journaling and processing and reading and now it's time to like the last little movement to kind of,
Yeah.
release and integrate and the surrender and vulnerability in that is the thing that I feel like in the now, I know the shifts and changes all the time as I do work with people and work with myself, but it's like that's what we resist the most. That ego hangs on so dang tight. And maybe it's not ego, our subconscious, our unconscious, our like that piece of us that doesn't want anything to change, whatever
Mhm.
bit of us that is, hangs on so tight to like wanting it to not move that to get to the place where the pain point is enough and the spiritual connection, I feels like that's a part of it too. At least it is in my world is deepened and connected enough that you decide it's time to surrender. It's time to be vulnerable. It's time to just be in it, experience it, and then navigate it with the support of, I mean, you had the support of your highest self today, the support of your spiritual counsel, whatever that looks like for you, and the support of a friend who cared and could hold space.
Mhm.
How amazing is that? And before you got there, there were a whole bunch of layers before that, like your husband bringing the thing in and having the spiritual retreat in the community and like, right? Like the amount of space that was held to provide the energy in the container that could support
Mhm.
what was about to happen
Right.
and how messy it got beforehand. Like, I don't even know if I'm going to do the hermitage thing. It's not really working out. And it's like, okay, well, it will when it's supposed to. And damn, didn't it?
Like,
you know?
holy moly. Okay. Guess we're really doing it this time. Like really, really doing
Yeah.
it.
How did you feel? So like I'm walking on the street, right? And just bawling and like, yeah, I don't really care what anybody else thinks. Or maybe you did care very much what anybody
Nope.
else thinks,
Not
but you
anybody
didn't turn
else's
around and go
business.
back. So
Nope. All
so
good.
like when you got back, like when we hung up and you finished your walk and completed whatever else you needed to do to kind of ground in and like take that exhale. Okay, here we are. Now what? Because that's usually it, right? It's like, oh God, now what? So I feel new and I don't know what to do. Where did you go from there?
I honestly had to contain because I had to do a supervision with one of my pre-licensed therapists that I'm supervising. So I had like an hour and I was like, what am I gonna do with this hour? I was like, I need to walk. And I was like, I really need to call Michelle. So like literally, like, I mean, and that's one of my superpowers, fortunately and unfortunately, is the ability to pretty much like lock it down if I have to. Um, so I like hardcore contained and I did supervision with somebody. And then I think I had a client right after that. So I had to like hold it together for a couple of hours, but it wasn't holding it together. It was just like, okay, I need to set this to the side for a little bit. And when my tasks are done, I can like relook at it again. Um, I think I might have done a bunch of art journaling that night.
Mm,
That might have been the night that I was drawing feathers and things.
nice.
Yeah.
Um, I want to address something that you were just talking about in the, compartmentalizing basically is what I heard you say. Like you just
Yeah.
tuck it away. And I think as long as it's not coming from avoidance, because sometimes it's us just avoiding it and running away from it. But like you had already gone so deep into it that you were already processing and integrating and all those things. I think sometimes those quote unquote distractions that very much can be avoidance, but I'm not saying that in this case. I think sometimes those are also divinely guided in that spirit's like, she needs a break. We're going to just lock some things in for her so she can be distracted for a hot second because she needs to pause out of this or it's going to take her somewhere that's just too much energy or just like it's not helpful. Like I believe we're supported divinely all the time. And so
Yeah.
sometimes those things where you're like, damn it, I wasn't done, I want to do this, is like that's not even, that wasn't your choice. That was spirit saying, hey, girl, we got you. We're going to give
Hmm.
you a pause. We're going to give you a break from this stuff that you've been doing for the last however many days that was of you doing that work, saying you need to pause and we're going to provide that for you. And we know you're not going to lock it up so tight that it's going to build up walls again. Like we know you got this because we're also supporting you in that. So I just think that's such a beautiful thing. And to be aware, like, I think sometimes we think we have to start to finish. Like I'm a person in human, like I like to start and finish projects. I don't like to get interrupted in the middle. And so I think
Hmm.
sometimes when we start diving into this deep dive stuff, we're like, well, I'm not done with my shadow work yet, though. I have to finish processing this. How now I have to do this other thing. Now I'm avoiding. It's like, no, no. Sometimes it's like this is chapter one and you finish chapter one and you get to breathe between chapter one and chapter two, and that's good. It's not avoidance. It's not bad. It doesn't halt your growth. It actually amplifies it and gives you capacity to go further. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think like oftentimes my like therapist part like is my best version of myself. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm calm, I'm compassionate, I'm patient. I can be a lot of things in those moments that I maybe struggle with when I'm like sort of not in that brain space, i.e. patience is my biggest one.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think just like having that different level of compassion for myself that I have for my clients, but I've never actually like done a good job of turning inward. Like I think that was also there and recognizing like it's okay. Like just pause. We're gonna revisit, right? Because I was probably annoyed that I couldn't just like work on my stuff. But just looked and I ended up writing some that night, not very much, but I think I did a bunch of art and like it was just one of those things where it was like, I think I just needed a break and that's okay. Like I
Hmm.
just needed time to let things percolate and to let things like mellow because that was a really, really big like processing realization moment.
Yeah. You got the big spiritual five happening right now. Spiritual high five.
Yay.
Like so many goosebumps. It's so
Yay.
good.
Yeah, I mean, that was like not what I was expecting. And also, Michelle and I talked, and she's like, "Oh, this happened because we have this on the radar." And I was like, "Okay, of course."
I forgot I said that. Maybe that
They're like,
wasn't fair to
you know
project
why
it,
this is
but like
happening, right?" And I was like, "No." And you're like, "Because we have this, and this coming up that we're talking about." I was like, "Cool, thanks."
that wasn't fair. That's my experience. Like that happens to me every time. It doesn't have to happen to you every time. I feel like I invite it because it's helpful for me. It makes me show up from a well, I was gonna say better place, and I don't love that word, but I show up from a place that has a different form of compassion and understanding because I literally just experienced it.
Hmm.
And so it's like, okay, they're just reminding me, like, look, you have these tools, and we're gonna show you. We're going to show you you have these tools. And there's always some nugget that happens for me that is like new and different that somebody in the room needed me to have that experience. I don't know. That sounds like I don't mean to make it righteous or about me. It's more just like that's how my relationship with my spirit guides works is like we
Hmm.
have this relationship like, hey, this is how you learn. You do it best this way. So we're going to
Yeah.
keep doing this. And this is again, divinely timed, divinely guided, like trust the process. You're benefiting from this too. Like I grow myself when these things
Hmm.
happen. So it's like, thank you. Thank you for putting me on this path and having me be in like my third or fourth lifetime of my business right now. And we won't talk about my personal life. Like how many versions of that have there been? But to be willing to pause and listen and go with that flow that is divine timing and guidance is pretty amazing. So like
Hmm.
I got that call that day. I was like, oh, this is so exciting. I wasn't like exuding that in the moment, but like hang up the phone and just be like, yes, I'm so excited for her. And also, I feel like I hope my intention was to make sure that after we hung up, it's like you can call me anytime, day or night. Like if you need
Oh,
something
I know
to
that.
process,
I
like,
know that. Yeah.
and I trusted that you would go there if you needed to. I also didn't get a huge hit that you were going to need to. Like you were like beautifully gliding your way through that, which I know it doesn't feel that way when you're in it, but it's like 100% you were gliding your way through that process.
I will say though that, in the past when I've gone through like big healing things, it has been like dark and angst filled and really hard and sometimes a fight, you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
feel like this time it was totally different. And I can say that like with 100% certainty that this is like probably my first time that I've done really, really big work, like A by myself, mostly alone, because I tend to be an external processor and I
Mhm.
wasn't. You know what I mean? Like I use my journal as my tool to externally process, and you were really my only like hardcore healing help phone call, which is really unusual for me. And
Mhm.
so, and then I did not have the angst. Like I had the Kuan Yin, super compassionate, really gentle, really loving stance on this, which is not my usual. I'm usually like, figure your shit out.
Yeah. You had patience.
Yeah, this is your own damn fault. Come on, let's get, like, let's get to it. Like, not helpful, right? Like, I know this.
Right.
I'm a psychologist. I know this doesn't apply to me ever. Um, Michelle's giving me a face.
Oh,
Um,
I know how that works. I mean, I just, they say teachers make the worst students, blah, blah, blah.
yeah, yeah, and
I don't
like,
know what they're
hi,
talking about.
hi, let's like try the thing that you tell everyone else to do, huh? How about that, you hypocrite? So I tried the
Yeah.
thing that I tried to do with everyone else, and it like, huh, look at that, holy shit, it worked differently.
That's so cool. That's
Yeah.
so beautiful. The other thing that I noticed when you were talking to me, and then we can wrap this up, but like when you were reflecting on who you used to be and how you used to show up,
Mm-hmm.
like so many times when people have like say those things to me, it's like weighted in guilt and shame.
Mm-hmm.
And yours wasn't. It was weighted in awareness, acceptance, and like a readiness to just like love yourself through it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that that's really different because prior, like I wouldn't even talk about like
Mm.
that part or those decisions I made because I mean, I am mortified and like embarrassed, but not nearly as significantly as I was. Like I don't feel nearly as shameful or as heavy. Like I feel bad, but I also I think during, one of those shower moments where you have the epiphany that you need to like make amends and like have an apology. I think I came home and had a whole conversation with the people that I had hurt and I like forgave them. I forgave myself. I asked them for their forgiveness, like all the things, right? And
And you're talking
so
about in the ethers, like you're not talking about like you called people up or wrote letters. You're talking about you did this
no,
in
no,
the
I was
ethers.
literally naked in my shower.
Yeah, okay.
Having a
Just making
conversation
sure.
with myself and my
Yeah.
spirit guides, and if
Okay.
their spirit guides were listening or whatever, right? But I'm like by myself having a whole conversation of forgiveness as I'm like scrubbing myself down and doing the thing. But it's one of those unplugged moments where everybody has the best ideas in the shower. And I
Yeah.
just like did it. Like I just did it in that moment and had this whole like external conversation, like literally out loud. Um, but after that, I was like, okay. And I realized like and in the moment I said, well, I forgive you. I also forgive me, like wholly and completely. And I was like, I didn't realize that I needed to forgive them. Like I thought it was all me.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? But
Hmm.
recognizing like I wasn't the only one in this like really nasty dance. And any of us could have ended the pattern, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
yeah. And so not being the sole like person to be blamed in that situation either, I think was a big revelation. So
So I feel like I want to close circling it to kind of like the definition of shadow work. So like
yeah.
for you, from a shadow work perspective, like can you just like break it down, like super simplify it? Like from a shadow work perspective, it was A and now it's B. Or do you know what I'm asking? I'm not wording it very well, but
So I think what you're asking is like from the shadow work part A, it was like this really dark, horrible part of myself that I didn't want to open up and look at. And I was perfectly fine leaving it in the vault and like not ever acknowledging that I was that person or did those things. And B, recognizing that that's not an option anymore and that I actually need to like shed the light on it and like take those parts out and like give them love and acceptance and compassion and talk about like with them and with myself about what happened and why I made the decisions I did and put it in the full context of my life and recognizing, and I think you told me like, babe, you were just doing the best you could with what you had. Like you were just trying to survive. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I really was trying to survive. And I just did the best I could with what I had and with what I knew and with how I was like programmed and conditioned, right? So I think just the acceptance and the compassion and the awareness that like it's okay. Like
Mhm.
everybody makes mistakes and it's okay. And that doesn't mean that you are never forgiven or that you don't deserve to be forgiven, you know?
That's key. That's so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that
thank you.
does that answer your question, you think?
Yeah, I was just curious, because I think a lot of people like, what is shadow work? I don't even know what that means. Or they think that it's like getting rid of those parts of you. And that's like absolutely like, we're not trying to get rid of anything. We're not hating on anything. We're actually learning to love all of us and understanding that like all those bits of us like served a purpose, you know?
Yeah.
They served a
Yeah.
purpose. And we get to forgive, we get to accept, we get to acknowledge, and we get to understand like, perhaps, likely, probably, we have not been viewing that bit of ourselves like it's not accurate in how we're engaging with it or hiding it or and that there's freedom on the other side of looking
Hmm.
and holding, literally holding and loving that part of yourself, and understanding that like we're all human and we all have those bits of us. And this isn't the comparison game of like that one's so much worse than that one, or like, I'm so much worse than everyone else because I did it this way, or it's like, no, no, it's not about that. It's like your journey, and every bit of your journey had a purpose for you. And
Hmm.
it's not good, bad, or indifferent. It's there, and you can lock it up in the vault, like as you said, or you can decide, or maybe you don't even decide it. Maybe it's placed in front of you over and over again until it just is. And then you can
I
give it
answered the
what it
knock.
needs. Yeah, you answer the knock, and then you look and you like the love that comes from it. And the understanding that like, oh gosh, I would never do that now. I've
Right.
evolved. I'm a better person, and I
Right.
again, I don't love the word better because it's like survival. Like
Well, I'm just a different
sometimes we
person
just
and
have to do the things. Yeah.
yeah, I have different awareness and experience. Hi, my brain is also fully formed. It wasn't.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I don't know.
And
I think so many
hormones.
people think they're supposed to like, hate it till it's gone, or you're never supposed to. And that's a healing thing anyway. Like when we have, atrocious things in our life, we think that healing from it means that we accept it, or that we accept the behavior that created the wound. And it's like that's not what that is about at all. It's so much different than that. And so I'm super excited, well, for you and the journey that you chose to go on, um, and the results of it, because you feel lighter and
Hmm.
just, I don't know, like there's an ease there that didn't exist before, which is such a beautiful thing, like space. Um, and then I'm excited that we get to do this work together and help other people, whoever finds us and decides it's like we're the good fit for them.
Right.
Well, I mean, let's go in the most beautiful, compassionate, through your timing and your divine timing kind of way, not in a forced or pushed or rushed. Just like, let's knock on a few doors and see what happens. Which ones are ready for us to open? Maybe it's just a little peek into the light. I don't know, but it's such a beautiful thing. So thank you for sharing your story today.
Thank you for asking me.
Any last little nuggets you want to share?
I don't think, I mean, I think like don't be afraid. Like, I mean, you get to be afraid and also maybe just take a tiny step towards, the thing that you might know that you need to do, but that you don't want to do.
Yeah. Beautiful. Ah, that's amazing. That's a wrap for today, I believe.
I think
Feel
so.
good? All
Yeah.
right. Bye. Be you every day.
Bye bye. Thanks.